Hello everyone, this is Fletch from Twilight Render. Welcome to the Twilight Render Getting Started video tutorial series, 6 Essentials to Rendering with SketchUp and Twilight Render Plugin. Please download the files from the link in the description below, and feel free to follow along. I'm an architect and designer myself, so there's no reason to be intimidated. I'm here to help, so let's dive in together. Let's get started by opening the Getting Started tutorial file. It says right here in the file name, Twilight Getting Started Tutorial.skp. First thing in the 6 Essentials to Rendering we talked about was the essential part of having a great model. The next part we talked about was having a great dynamic position for your camera. The third item is, of course, materials. And Twilight Render makes that easy for you with physically accurate materials. If you apply any of the SketchUp materials here, especially any SketchUp material with a texture in it, we provide already the bump texture and the correct settings for you if you're using Twilight Render Pro. If you're not using Twilight Render Pro, you can still get the benefits of physically accurate materials. All you need to do is, after you apply the material, you click on the Twilight Material Template tool, click on the object, and here in Pro it's already set up for you, but you can go to Templates. This Polished Concrete Old from the Asphalt and Concrete collection in SketchUp. We applied Perfect Reflection Low, so it would be Perfect Reflection Low. And it's set up for you. Okay, so if you use glass, so let's go to the glass. Let's try translucent glass gray. It's probably the most commonly used glass in SketchUp, maybe besides the translucent glass blue. If you apply that, it will automatically render in SketchUp for Twilight Render if you're using Twilight Render V2 Pro, like I said before. First, let's select the glass real quick, as you can see here. This is what it looks like when it's in Pro. Go to Templates, Architectural Glass, Common, and this is what you'll get, this glass texture. Let's look at water. You just select the pool water here, apply it right there. If we want to go underneath the water, we can go to Landscaping, choose the river rock, apply that here. And in each case, again, if you're running Twilight Render Pro, these will all just render good for you right out of the box. In this case, for the pool, the reflective pool, well, let me briefly go to stone, and let's go ahead and quickly apply some materials. We'll apply the marble to here, and we'll apply, actually, let's try brick and cladding. Here's the stucco. We can apply that to the roof. And let's just render this real quickly. Go to the render dialog. We've got a low render setting. We've got a low resolution for quick rendering. Hit play. And you can see that it's going to automatically apply the material properties for you. And yeah, it doesn't look very realistic. For one, we don't have a great environment, which is going to be the next tip in the 6 essential steps for a great rendering. Essentially, you do have the reflective properties, and the glass looks great, the water looks nice. But for a reflecting pool, maybe we want to apply a little bit of a ripple, a little bit of a bump. So let's go and see how we can do that. You click on Procedural, and this is going to be run by a mathematical algorithm. Now you can choose Twilight Perlin Noise, and let's set the size of the bump. You can see that it's very strong here. If we were to choose the ball and cube, which will be a much larger surface area, you can see that the pool would not look good at that amount of bumps. So let's go to 0.004. In my experimentation, this works great for a nice soft ripple on a pond. And then if I were to hit render again, we're not going to save that image. We're going to pause this for just a moment and let it render. and then I'll show you the results. Okay, here we go. So in less than 30 seconds we have the results, and you can see that the ripple is very nice. Here in the Twilight Perlin noise, we could, if you want to see larger ripples, I would say it's basically perfect the way it is. But if you want to, you can change the scale right here. So let's do that just real briefly, just so you can see what happens if we change the scale in all directions for the Perlin noise. Let's make it 10 times bigger, just to exaggerate the effect. We'll hit play, and then we'll pause and see the results at the end. And there we go. You can see how the scale has changed for that Perlin noise. It's quite a dramatic change, so let's change it back to what looked great at the default one. Remember, inside of the material dialog, you can always choose a different material from this list if you can't immediately click on it in your scene for some reason. And you can always jump back to where you were before just by choosing it right down from the drop-down menu there. Closing this. Another powerful tool that you have in the templates are the floor materials, which are wood and tile. So we've already applied a material from SketchUp right inside of our scene here. And if we were to open up Exploration Render, and we're going to disable Material Preview here, because we're going to be rendering inside of here, and we don't want it trying to render both of them at the same time. Now when we choose templates for the Polished Concrete Old, actually I'm going to enable this just to so it's not confusing. Yes, we're in the Polished Concrete Old right here. Now I disabled it again so that it won't render. We can go to Templates, Floor, Tile. And what that's going to do is randomize on a, let's set this to 50. We will randomize the texture every 50 centimeters. And then if we click Use Edges, it will create the tiles at 50 centimeter intervals. Okay. In this case, in this scene, I believe it's a 1 meter tile, and there we go. So instead of having these lines drawn on that are doing us no good inside the SketchUp model, we can quickly get a tile look floor using the tile texture. If we wanted to have a offset of the tile, we could set 50% offset, and now it offsets at 50%, maybe 33%, so we get 1/3. And there you go, you've got your offsets for your tile. You can choose a different way. If you want to offset on the Y instead of the X, it'll offset the other direction. So that's what this axis is for. You can also choose random. So if I were to set this back to 0 and choose random planks, now it's going to randomize the length of each tile. That might be helpful in some situations. It works great when you have a wood floor, if you use random planks for a wood floor. So that's one handy template that we have here in SketchUp and Twilight Render. However, let me show you one important thing about materials and back faces. I mentioned before in the modeling section where you never want to paint on groups, with the exception of painting like I did with the group of glass here. I put all the glass inside of a single group so I could paint it quickly with one click. You would not normally want to paint a group like these walls I painted with one click, but you would not want to normally do that. That's a bad idea because now I can't go in and I can't map the texture, and texture mapping is extremely important if you want to do photorealistic rendering. But also, if you have back faces and you paint back faces, let's choose Yeah, let's choose this one. Stone Masonry Multi. And let's choose this one. Concrete Block. If I were to render that, you'll notice that something is broken, something doesn't look right. I've got to use the Exploration Render here. By the way, in the Exploration Render settings, I'm using medium fast here. And it's a very quick, and you'll notice here that something is very wrong, and that's because these are reversed. So the priority when you render in SketchUp with Twilight Render, it's got to choose which face and which direction. So for instance, the bump map that should be going down is bumping up. And that's because you're looking at the back face. If we were to reverse that, and again, I'm still painting the group, I'm not painting the faces inside the group. And now I hit render. It's better. Okay, I'm on medium fast. I need to change the settings here so we're looking at the correct settings. You can see that now this material is rendering correctly. The one that is reversed is not. But you still don't want to paint on the group with textures on the front face only. Because, for instance, these tiles want to be going the other direction on this stairway, and maybe they want to be bigger as well. So we need to go in here, and if I want to change the texture, I can't. I'm going to go to Entity Info here. I'm going to reset this to default. And now we're going to go to Materials. I'm going to open up that stair. I'm going to paint onto the stair. I'm going to hold Shift key down to paint everything in there. Now I'm going to right click on the texture on the face that I want to remap. And now I get this option. I can change the texture position. I can go here. I can rotate it. I can rescale it. And then in SketchUp, you'll need to hold down the Alt key and choose the eyedropper on that face that I just texture mapped and paste it onto an adjacent face so that it will work. Then we would want to go in and do a bevel on that edge. We'll have to map that beveled edge as well. And then we need to stop and reload this. Reload all geometry. And now it's going to map properly in the preview. Okay, so again, we don't want to map on groups and we don't want to map back faces. Priority is always going to be put textures on the front face only. What's important for photorealistic rendering is having great materials. The SketchUp materials are good for getting started, for a quick visualization, a quick concept, but they are no match for great materials. So if we switch over to the complete model, we have mapped in more appropriate materials, and these materials are more accurate to the real-life Barcelona pavilion. So if you open that, you can see that the granite and the marble walls and the textures are all a lot better. Let's briefly look at these procedurals though. If we go to the Sculpture Only tab, we can look at the sculpture. I'm going to move it over just a little bit, and we're going to talk about the procedural materials on this model right here. We have used the template paint gloss, so we went to template paint gloss, and then we applied in the color channel and the bump channel the same Twilight Knobby marble texture. We set the size of the bump to 0.050, and in the Twilight Knobby marble texture parameters, We chose the high color to be this kind of light tan color and the low color to be a dark bronze color. We inverted them so that we would get the light color being inside the cracks and the dark colors on the major part of the surface. And here you can see that we set the scale to be 0.1. And this is how the texture looks when it's rendered out in Twilight. It just looks fantastic. On the procedural side, just make sure that your scale also matches the same scale for bump as it did for the color. If you were to have different scale, then it looks a little bit weird. For instance, if I were to set this to 1 here and let it re-render, you can see the bump really looks strange. So definitely make sure you play with the procedural materials. They are extremely powerful, and there's a large variety of them. When you choose your scene over here, make sure you choose it appropriate to the size of the object that you are trying to render inside of SketchUp. So if you were looking at for instance, the sculpture here we know is approximately 6 foot tall, and if we know that this cube that we're rendering here is 1 foot, that helps us to visualize how it's going to look over there. If we chose the wrong size, let's try this. There we go, we can see what's happening. If we chose the wrong size here, it would be very difficult to actually visualize what's going to happen on the real object there. We can't really tell what's going on. This thing's just too big and I'm zoomed too far out from this object to be able to tell what's going on. So it's important to choose the right preview setting. If you are doing a translucent texture, try the translucent face or translucent solid. Translucent face is, for instance, you need this preview to visualize for lamps. And translucent solid would be, for instance, maybe a big piece of window glass that you want to be translucent. Maybe you have a chair that's slightly translucent or something. That's when you use those. But otherwise, I usually use cube 1 foot or 30 centimeters or ball and cube. The ball and cube I find is very nice for previewing certain types of materials such as metal. Well, all of them. I almost exclusively use this until I get into these procedurals. As soon as I get in the procedurals, then I end up switching to the cube 1 foot. Alright, so you can see how much easier it is to visualize what you're doing. So I hope this was helpful to you, and feel free to go in and explore how each of these materials is set up inside of the complete model. And keep in mind that the textures that you choose will have a massive impact onto the photorealistic feeling of your rendering. Typically on the forums, what I see with new people to rendering, they are choosing really bad quality images for their textures, or they're choosing the wrong template. Please hit that like button if this tutorial's been helpful for you. Stay tuned for our next segment, which will be about the environmental controls in Twilight Render. This will be step 4 in our 6 essentials to rendering with SketchUp and Twilight Render Plugin. Be sure to subscribe for more tutorials. Thanks for spending this time with me, Fletch from Twilight Render Support, and until next time, I'll see you on the forums.